The whistle blows and we're on our way again. We've now passed the halfway point on the journey, and as we leave Ballasalla Station, our next stop is at Ronald's Way Halt, a relatively new station for passengers travelling to and from the airport. Almost immediately we cross the Douglas to Port Erin road again at Ballasalla level crossing. This is one of the busiest crossings on the line, and there's always a queue of cars waiting for the train to pass. As we work our way out of the village, you'll see that this is one of the newer areas of housing development here. Many of the houses in the older part of the village further to the right were built from stone plundered from Russian Abbey. We're gathering speed again and also continuing to descend. We've dropped down to 90 feet above sea level now, and we'll be at half that height by the time we reach our next stop in less than 2 minutes' time. We'll shortly be joined by the Silver Burn to our right, one of the island's smaller rivers which flows into the sea at Castletown. We'll stay on its left and only cross it immediately after leaving Castletown Station. We've called at 3 stations since we left Douglas, and there are 5 more ahead. But our next stop is surely the most basic on the line. Ronald's Way Halt was created in 1967 to provide a service to passengers arriving at and departing from the island's airport. It's set next to an industrial estate and is a few hundred yards from the terminal. Initially there wasn't even a platform here, but a basic one was added and a revamp in 2001. For a single season in 1971 it was renamed Great Meadow Halt, after the former racecourse that lies alongside, but reverted to Ronald's Way Halt the following year. Like a number of stations along the line, Ronald's Way Halt is a request stop, and passengers are advised to signal clearly to the train that they want to board. Our fireman acknowledges the passenger's request, and Loch glides into the platform to allow him aboard. The door closes, the guard blows his whistle, and Loch responds. Our short halt at Ronald's Way is complete, and we're off on our way to the island's ancient capital of Castletown. Originally, Castletown was designed as the terminus of what was called the South Line. But as we heard earlier, the building of a short-lived deep-water port at Port Erin gave reason for an extension to there. It's just a short hop to Castletown, and we'll be there in 2 minutes. As is fitting for what was to have been the southern terminus for this line, it's one of the larger stations, with a fine booking office and waiting room on the southbound platform. The old goods sidings remain, and you'll see them on the left as we enter the station. Castletown is a charming spot with an active harbour that still supports the Isle of Man's fishing fleet. Next to it is Castle Rushen, one of Europe's best preserved medieval castles. Its origins date back to Norse times, when a fortified site was built to guard the river entrance. Since then, it was developed by successive rulers of the island in the 13th and 16th centuries and remains a magnificent edifice towering over the town. Our last stop was at Ronald's Way Halt, and the airport's main runway is off to our left now. Although we can't see that, you will see an aircraft on short finals crossing from right to left. The Bombardier-8 belongs to Fly B and is arriving on the Isle of Man from Gatwick. Ahead of us is a farm bridge as we begin to slow for Castletown Station. We're now 2/3 of the way through our journey from Douglas to Port Erin, and the nature of the final section is very different from that which we encountered on the first part out of Douglas. The tracks have now split as we approach the platform, and the original sidings, which were so much a part of the commercial side of this railway, appear on the left. On the right is another of the water tanks along the line, designed to provide a top-up for engines like Loch if something unexpected happens on the journey. Castletown is always a popular and busy station, and today is no exception. There's a good crowd waiting to board, with families and children perhaps heading for a day by the seaside. The station master approaches with the token for the line ahead, and it's swapped for the token for the section from Castletown to Ballasalla. Safety is of prime importance on any railway system, and the proper use of tokens ensures there's no chance of a head-on collision on the single track. A last word from the station master and we're on our way again. The next station is a request stop at Balabeg in about 3 minutes. As we leave Castletown Station, you can see one of the two pubs which are quite literally on the station's doorstep. Obviously, the Victorians thought that working and travelling on the railway was thirsty work. We're back to single-track working as the line turns to the right. Ahead we'll parallel the Castletown bypass for a short distance before swinging northwest towards Balabeg. We cross the Silver Burn finally, having run alongside it from just outside Ballasalla, and it runs into Castletown Harbour 200 yards to the left. Loch is accelerating hard. We're at the lowest point on the line, only about 20 feet above sea level, and there's a very gentle climb ahead until we reach the second station at Colby. The Isle of Man is famous throughout the world for motorcycle racing. The best-known event is the TT, the Tourist Trophy Races, which take place over the 37.73-mile mountain circuit to the northeast of here each June. But the TT isn't alone in attracting those who crave speed on two wheels. The Southern 100 takes place over the 4.25-mile Ballown circuit on public roads in July, and a part of the route is now on our left-hand side. Ahead is the green building at the start and finish line, which serves as the club headquarters. It's a busy spot during racing and attracts entrants and spectators from around the world, keen to sample motor racing on an island which has championed the sport for almost as long as this railway has existed. The track bends to the northwest, and the by now familiar outlines of Crogniarila and South Barul appear on the horizon once more. The land around here is flat and fertile, rivaling the island's northern plain for its farming. And the lack of any significant geographical features is reflected in the path taken by the railway. Here we find the longest sections of straight line, and the curves between them are long and gentle. Between here and the turn after Balabeg, the track runs straight and true for a mile and a half with just one short curve in the middle. And beyond that, beginning at Colby, is the longest single straight on the entire line, at a few yards under 1 mile. Loch is now powering along at some speed, with the site of the condensation from her smokestack visible for miles around. On the other side of the bend ahead lies Balabeg Halt. Like previous halts such as Ronald's Way, the onus is on any passenger waiting to board the train to make themselves obvious to the crew. The driver gives a long blast on the whistle to make anyone waiting at the station aware of our impending arrival. And the fireman leans out of the cab to look through the bend and catch sight of an outstretched arm requesting the train to stop. Visibility is good, and it would be a shame to lose the momentum Loch has built up since Castletown by slowing down too much unnecessarily. As the track straightens out once more, Balabeg Halt comes into sight. It's obvious that there's no one on the platform with an outstretched arm, so we continue to thunder on. We're just 3 minutes away from our next stop at Colby. This is a full station, and although it lacks the presence of station buildings like those at Ballasalla or Castletown, the track splits to serve the platforms so it can be used as a passing point for trains travelling in opposite directions on the single-track line. Today, though, we'll be using the wrong platform on the northbound line. Earlier on the journey, we passed by the private railway in the grounds of Crogger House. It's an example of the enthusiasm that exists on the Isle of Man for railways of different types. Government support for the steam railway has ensured that this valuable Victorian system is maintained and operated to a high standard. But it's not the only example of rail systems on the island which have been cherished and cared for, whether by government or volunteers. The Groudle Glen Railway was built at the end of the 19th century to appeal to Victorian tourists who like to combine walking with a breath of bracing sea air. The 2-foot gauge track was built in Groudle Glen, just north of Douglas, and took visitors to a zoo attraction at the Sea Lion Rocks. It was fitting that one of the locomotives was called Sea Lion. The railway survived until the 1960s, but over the following decade it was dismantled. In the 1980s, a group of volunteers began work to restore the system to operation, and the task took another decade. BNFL apprentices brought Sea Lion back into use, and today it continues to entertain tourists in a tranquil area of the island. There are two other rail systems which are very popular with tourists, the Manx Electric Railway and the Mountain Railway. The Electric Railway runs a service up the island's east coast, from the northern end of the Prom in Douglas to Ramsey, and it intersects with the Mountain Railway at Laxey. It was built a few years after the steam railway and reached Ramsey in 1899. It operates on the same 3-foot gauge and is powered by overhead electric cables supplying 550 volts DC. 2 of the original cars are still running today, and the road provides some spectacular views of the island's coastline as it wends its way north. The electric railway's twin is the Snaefell Mountain Railway, which runs from Laxey Station to the summit of the island's only mountain, Snaefell, with a peak of 2,034 feet. It has a slightly wider gauge at 3 feet 6 inches and retains the original bow design of the electric railway for collecting power from the overhead cables. It uses the Fell Incline Railway System centre rail for braking on steep gradients, which was named after its inventor John Fell. And it was his son George who originally surveyed the line when it was intended to be operated by steam engines. This line was never built, but the idea was resurrected in 1895 and astonishingly, by August that year, it was operational. We've now arrived in Colby, and again we've a few families waiting to board to head to Port Erin. The name of this village comes from the Norse col for a hill and bur meaning farm. It's long been associated with the Methodists, and John Wesley, who founded the movement with his brother Charles, preached nearby in 1781. With the now familiar toot of the whistle, we're underway again, and the driver checks we're on time using a device which would have been somewhat unfamiliar to the Victorian train driver, his mobile phone. As we steam out of the village, the condensation from Loch smokestack complements the skyscape ahead. We're just 8 minutes from our destination at Port Erin, and we'll make one more stop on the way at Portsonbury in 5 minutes. Portsonbury is one of the most picturesque settlements on the island. Set around a wide sandy bay, it was once a major port for trading and fishing. Its outer harbour is unique on the Isle of Man, being accessible at all states of the tide. There's an RNLI lifeboat base here, and it's also home to the Isle of Man Yacht Club. Ahead are the hills to the south of Port Erin. It's here that the perfectly preserved village of Cregnish lies. This is the site of the Manx National Folk Museum. It opened in 1938 and is dedicated to preserving and displaying the way that villagers typically lived and worked during the 19th century. The whistle blows its warning as we approach another level crossing. But a quarter of a mile ahead is a request stop with a slightly confusing name. It's called The Level and is set beside the next level crossing we reach. We're not stopping there today, but you should catch a glimpse of the tiny station building on the right through the steam. We're now at the end of what is the longest section of straight line on the steam railway, and we begin to make a long, gentle turn to the left. Our destination is Port Erin, pretty much straight ahead at this point. But we'll make a short detour to the south to call at Portsonbury Station before we reach the terminus. Loch is running at full tilt now. It's almost as if she can smell the sea at the destination. It's only a mile and a half away. The buildings of Portsonbury begin to come into sight. But before we quite get there, there's another level crossing to pass over and the obligatory blast on the whistle. Records show that Portsonbury was at the centre of an annoyance for passengers in the early 1920s. For some reason, it had been decided that their tickets would no longer be checked on arrival at the terminus. Instead, a ticket inspector would work the train at the previous station. The new system might have helped the company catch a few fare dodgers and earn a bit more income, but the crackdown was delaying trains by up to half an hour. In 1937, a furious row erupted between Portsonbury commissioners and the railway, following the introduction of a non-stop express between Douglas and Port Erin. The fight went on for months, with the people of Portsonbury concerned about the effect on tourism. The town continued to press the case, demanding full parity with Port Erin. Eventually, quite late in the season, some ground was given when it was discovered that passengers were travelling to Port Erin on the express and immediately returning to Port St Mary on the next train. The power is off now, and Port St Mary Station is just ahead. The platform lies immediately to the west of the level crossing on the main road, and the promenade is just a short stroll to the south. The stunning Chapel Bay is overlooked by the houses on the prom, and the south-facing sandy beach is well protected from most prevailing winds. And so we arrive at Port St Mary Station. This is the last stop before our destination at Port Erin, and we've less than a mile to go. We're off on the final short leg of our journey. We'll be on the platform at Port Erin in 2.5 minutes, having completed a journey on what must be the most fascinating steam railway still in operation in the British Isles. The track curves around to the right, and suddenly Port Erin is in sight. On the right side of the horizon is Bradda Head, and even from this distance we can see Milner's Tower, standing above the point where the cliffs drop down to the sea. It was built in 1871 and named after a generous benefactor of the town, William Milner, who owned Milner's Safe Company. The tower is in the shape of a lock and key and was meant to be built in secret as a thank you for all Milner had done for the town. But he discovered the plans, and as was typical of the man, ended up donating the bulk of the money to pay for its construction. Our journey has taken nearly an hour, and Loch's crew will need to prepare the little engine for her return journey to Douglas once we arrive. She'll need her water tank replenishing, and a fire will have to be built up to bring the boiler back up to temperature. Then, in an hour or so, she'll be off on another trip. Immediately before the station, we pass over the final level crossing on Droghedfell Road, and the first of the engine sheds appears on the right. Beyond that, the collection of tracks, points and platforms show just how busy a station Port Erin still is. And as we pull onto the platform, there's the expected collection of onlookers. People with cameras, small boys on bikes. In fact, anyone who looks upon this charming railway ends up with a smile on their face. Our journey from Douglas has shown the importance of solid engineering in the Victorian mind, and the fact that this little railway still exists is a tribute not only to those who built it, but also to the people who run it, maintain it, and travel on it today. Thank you for travelling with us from Douglas to Port Erin on the Isle of Man Steam Railway, and we hope you enjoyed your trip.